You know, when you think about America's greatest unsolved mysteries, there's one name that just kind of floats above all the others, literally carried away on a parachute into a stormy night. Today, we're diving deep into the enduring enigma of D.B. Cooper. So, picture this. It's November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve. On board Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, there's this guy in a business suit. He calmly orders a bourbon and water. But here's the thing. He has absolutely no intention of getting where that plane is going. And with those chillingly quiet words to a flight attendant, the man who called himself Dan Cooper kicked off a crime that would baffle the entire country. He then opened his briefcase, just enough to show her what looked like sticks of dynamite. So what did he want? Well, his demand was pretty simple. $200,000 in cash, which, by the way, is over $1.5 million today, and 4 parachutes. After he got his money, he mated the pilots take off again, and then somewhere over the super rugged wilderness of Washington state, he jumped from the back of that Boeing 727 right into the dead of night, into a freezing rainstorm, and straight into American folklore. He was never, ever seen again. And for more than 50 years, one question has absolutely captivated everyone from FBI agents to internet sleuths. What in the world happened to the man we all know as D.B. Cooper? You have to understand, the D.B. Cooper case isn't just another mystery, it's a total anomaly. I mean, it stands completely alone as the only unsolved air piracy in the history of the United States. Period. So who was this guy? Well, eyewitnesses all painted a picture of someone who was, well, utterly unremarkable. Mid-40s, business suit, calm, polite. He wasn't some frantic criminal. He was cool, calculated, just totally methodical. And get this, even the famous name, D.B. Cooper, was actually a media screw-up. The ticket just said Dan Cooper. So how did he pull it off? I mean, this was no lucky break. Cooper knew exactly what he was doing. He exploited the technical and security weaknesses of the 1970s airline industry with, surgical precision. The whole thing unfolded with this just chilling efficiency. It started just 10 minutes after takeoff. For the next 5 hours, Cooper was in total control. He landed the plane, swapped the passengers for his cash, and took off again. And then at 8:13 p.m., the crew felt this sudden change in air pressure. And that was it. That was the moment he almost certainly stepped off those stairs and just vanished. And this is where you realize this guy was no amateur. His technical knowledge was undeniable. He demanded a flight plan that would make most pilots sweat. Super low altitude, landing gear down, flaps extended. All of this to slow the jet down to the bare minimum speed for a jump. But the conditions outside? Absolutely brutal. A negative 50-degree wind chill, and you couldn't see a thing. You know, Cooper's crime literally changed the way planes were built. After a few copycat attempts, the FAA made this device mandatory, the Cooper Vane. It's just a simple piece of metal that uses wind pressure to lock the rear stairs shut when the plane is in the air. His hijacking permanently closed the exact loophole he used to escape. Okay, so with the man gone, all investigators could do was focus on what he left behind. And for decades, that trail was incredibly thin. It really all hinged on just 2 key pieces of physical evidence. The first real clue didn't pop up until 1980. A young boy found bundles of the ransom money, just rotting away on a riverbank. This seemed to suggest Cooper died in the jump, right? But that tie he left behind on the plane? Well, it pointed to a very different kind of story. One about a man who worked in a very specific, very high-tech world. And get this, decades later, that cheap JCPenney clip-on tie, it became the single most important clue in the whole case. Using powerful electron microscopes, scientists found over 100,000 microscopic particles embedded deep in its fabric. Now, we're not talking about random dust here. These particles were like a chemical resume. I mean, the presence of pure titanium, for example, was exceptionally rare back in 1971. It was used almost exclusively in advanced aerospace manufacturing. This was pointing to a guy with serious access to cutting-edge tech. And that leads us to a stunning breakthrough. Very, very recent analysis has identified these specific, rare alloys of titanium and antimony right there on the tie. And those alloys directly match patents held by a company called Crucible Steel. which just happened to be a primary contractor for Boeing in Seattle during that exact time. The tie is pointing to a specific building. So for decades, you can imagine the FBI investigated a ton of people, over 800 in fact. The list of suspects is this fascinating collection of veterans, paratroopers, and disgruntled employees. But a few names have always floated to the top.
But what if the answer wasn't hidden in someone's military record or personal history? What if the real answer was literally woven into the fabric of that cheap clip-on tie? This new evidence from Crucible Steel has put a brand new name at the very top of the list.
For years, the big focus was on guys like Richard McCoy, a copycat hijacker, or Robert Rackstraw, a highly decorated vet. But now the evidence is pointing somewhere else entirely, to a man named Vince Peterson. He was a titanium engineer at Crucible Steel, a Boeing contractor. He was a physical match, and most importantly, those unique particles on the tie, they lead right to his workplace. But you know, the D.B. Cooper story is about so much more than just clues and suspects. It's really about how a criminal, a hijacker, somehow became a legend. See, there are kind of two realities to this case. In 2016, the FBI officially closed their active investigation. They concluded he most likely didn't even survive the jump. But in the public's mind, he's a folk hero, a kind of anti-establishment phantom who pulled off the perfect crime and just got away with it. So why does this story still grip us so much? Well, it's because it's a perfect void of information, right? It's the only crime of its kind that's still unsolved. We never found most of the money, or his parachute, or a body. And that void, it gets filled by this incredibly passionate community of citizen detectives who just refuse to let this case go cold. And that brings us to the final question. With these brand new forensic techniques pointing towards a very specific person, are we finally on the verge of putting a name to the ghost? Or has the myth of D.B. Cooper, the man who just vanished into a storm, become too powerful to ever be replaced by the simple and maybe even boring truth?